Welcome to Cinema Bites, your go-to for movie recaps in a flash, big twists, epic moments, all in just minutes. Dan was working in the women's bathroom, fixing the exhaust fan, when suddenly, something fell from the fan onto his face. The man dropped everything and started freaking out because of the mess, struggling to hold himself together and not throw up. But in the end, he ran into one of the stalls to throw up. After he finished and decided to leave, he heard the sound of girls coming into the bathroom. Quickly, he hid himself inside the stall and tried not to move or make any sound. The two girls came in, dressed in Christmas outfits, talking and joking with each other. Dan was eavesdropping on them against his will. He kept listening until he heard one of them say she was bitten by a homeless man in the street. Dan was surprised, but his curiosity got the better of him, so he peeked through the small opening in the door to see what was happening. The girl who said she was bitten suddenly stopped. Her body started shaking strangely. Her eyes turned completely black, and she attacked her friend and bit her savagely. Blood splattered everywhere, and the other girl screamed so loudly it felt like her soul left her body. This wasn't a normal bite, it was a zombie bite. In the chaos, Dan tried to get his phone to call the police, but his hand was shaking. The phone fell into the toilet. But he didn't have time to think, because the zombie heard the phone fall and started banging on the stall door violently. He was frozen in place. The zombie dropped to the floor and started crawling under the stall door. He felt like this was the end. The zombie reached out, grabbed his pants, and started pulling him toward her. The man was fighting for his life, trying to free himself, and in the end, with no weapon to defend himself, he grabbed a toilet lid and smashed it on the zombie's head. Surprisingly, the hit worked. The zombie fell to the ground for a few moments. This was Dan's only chance to escape. He opened the door and ran as fast as he could out of the bathroom. The whole place was chaos. People screaming, other zombies walking around the mall attacking anyone she saw. The entire mall had turned into a living nightmare. Dan ran toward the exit, but the main gate was locked, and people were crowded trying to open it. At that moment, he noticed the emergency exit was open at the end of the corridor. Without thinking, he ran toward it, dodging zombies as best he could. Before he could reach the door, someone moved in the darkness. Someone in a suit, standing as if he was waiting. And this wasn't just anyone. It was his boss. But the problem was, his boss had become a zombie too, and he'd been angry at Dan for a long time. Dan, still inside the bathroom, his heart pounding, couldn't believe what was happening around him. Suddenly, another zombie appeared out of nowhere. In his panic, his foot slipped on the toilet lid, and luckily, the zombie chasing him slipped too, fell into the toilet, and got sucked. Dan was stunned for a moment, unable to believe that actually happened. He decided to crawl under the partitions between the stalls to escape, but before he could open the door, he found another zombie waiting for him outside. This one was even holding a fried chicken drumstick in his hand, but as soon as he saw Dan, he dropped the food. In his panic, Dan accidentally turned on the hand dryer, which created noise and confusion, distracting the zombies. He took the opportunity to run, but as soon as he got out of the bathroom, disaster struck. The whole place was full of zombies. With no way to escape, Dan ran back to the bathroom and shut the door quickly. He tried to pull himself together and think of a plan. Looking in the mirror, he saw himself terrified, but then an idea came to him. He decided to use the mirror to trick the zombies, moving it so it looked like someone else was standing behind the door to distract them for a while. Finally, after everything that happened, he started to pull himself together. With some focus, he managed to put the vent cover back on, but as he was trying to process the situation, he noticed something, a phone number written on the wall. He ran to the phone, full of excitement, but suddenly remembered his phone was still in the toilet. He had to go back and get it. He reached into the water and got the phone. To clean it off, he washed it under the tap. But when he tried to call security, he only managed to say 2 words before the phone died and burned out. Dan sat on the floor defeated, surrendering to the disaster he was in. But suddenly, a faint voice came from the next bathroom. "Are you alive?" Dan froze, his heart dropping to his feet. It was another girl trapped inside. Her name was Hits, and her voice was so reassuring. Dan, still hung up on love and relationships, imagined she must be beautiful and single. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. Her voice gave him hope and made him pull himself together and think of a solution. But the problem was, the bathroom was still full of zombies. He checked the next stall and found a tiered clothes belonging to one of the zombies, and he found a severed finger in front of him. Without thinking too much, he decided to use it cleverly and made a slingshot out of it. He would use it to hit the fire alarm, and if it worked, people would come to rescue him. He tried the first time, failed, tried again, still failed. It was getting frustrating, but before he could try a third time, suddenly the door opened. It was the building security guard, and he looked very professional, wearing his uniform and full of confidence. But Dan quickly threw the finger he had with the slingshot. and instead of triggering the fire alarm, the security guard blew his whistle. The poor security guard started coughing and choking, but the zombies showed him no mercy. At that moment, they attacked him, and Danny stood frozen in his place, not believing what had happened. But the sound of Hazel brought him back to reality and encouraged him not to give up, to keep trying. He mustered his strength and pulled the slingshot again for one last try, but this time, he had to hit the target. As he was pulling the slingshot again, his hand was shaking, and the shot hit something nowhere near the fire alarm. But instead of the shot hitting the alarm, it hit a hanging ladder, knocked it down, and it fell in front of him. He quickly took advantage of the situation, climbed the ladder cautiously, and managed to reach the top of the tank. Finally, he grabbed the toolbox. Danny is never lucky. As he was coming down the ladder, he slipped. The toolbox flipped, and the hammer inside flew out and fell into the tank. By coincidence, a zombie was standing next to the tank, so he found the hammer in his hand. The zombie armed with the hammer started banging on the shaker outside. Danny was watching, but suddenly, he started provoking the zombie with words and gestures, making them angry, and hit the cabin door with the hammer. And the zombie kept banging on the door with all his strength until the hammer got stuck in the door. Danny grabbed it, pulled it out, and got his weapon back. He raised it over his head to hit the zombie, but before he could celebrate, another zombie grabbed him and bit his arm. Danny stood frozen, sure that this was his end, that he was now infected. He was devastated, but suddenly he started laughing hysterically, because the zombie who bit him was wearing dentures, so it was as if he hadn't been bitten at all. But the problem wasn't over. The zombies outside were getting more aggressive every second. Danny knew the only solution was to escape to the room where Hazel was. He started breaking the barrier behind him with determination. After great effort, he made an opening big enough to crawl through and quickly followed Hazel's voice. Finally, he reached her location. But when he opened the barrier between them, he discovered she was nothing like he imagined. He was expecting a pretty girl, but she was strong and had a massive athletic build. Hazel saw the shock on his face and said directly, "I know you're shocked. You shouldn't look at me." Danny tried to explain that it wasn't like that and that he wouldn't judge her by her appearance, but Hazel wasn't convinced. She told him she suffered from people's looks and their mockery, and what scared Danny the most was that she suddenly opened the bathroom door and the zombies outside had been waiting for this very moment. But before he could say a word, the zombies stormed the room and attacked Hazel. The zombies literally tore her apart in front of his eyes while he stood frozen, unable to move. She was the first girl he ever felt attached to, the first time he felt he wasn't alone, and suddenly, everything was gone. Danny stood in shock, but he knew he had no choice but to escape. He quickly ran to the ventilation shaft, but as soon as he opened it, he found it full of crawling zombies inside. Even the ventilation shafts weren't safe. Now, the only option left was the bathroom again. He rushed in, stood there frustrated, not knowing how to get out. Suddenly, his eyes fell on a drawing Hazel had made on the wall. He remembered her words and broke down in tears. But then, an idea lit up in his mind. Why don't I use what I have here in the bathroom? He wrapped himself completely in toilet paper, pretending to be a mummy, and said, "If the zombies think I'm one of them, they won't attack me." He quickly opened the bathroom door and walked out disguised among the zombies, and the idea worked. The zombies didn't notice him. He passed among them as if he were invisible. The corridor was eerily normal, and he tried to move slowly. Finally, Danny reached the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. The door opened. He ran inside and quickly closed it. The elevator opened on the ground floor. He got out safe, escaping the nightmare, but his feelings were all over the place. He still couldn't believe he'd made it out. Before leaving the building, he stopped in front of the bathroom door, took Hazel's drawing as a memento he'd never forget. He went out into the street, found a phone booth, quickly entered, and called his mom. "Don't go outside, zombies are everywhere." But outside, things were much worse. Zombies were everywhere, and the phone booth he used was surrounded again with zombies. And here the movie ends. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for what's next.